This time I want to talk about an important mechanic of the golf swing and part of the TPI test where if you cannot pass this, you are more susceptible to lower back pain. What I am talking about is the posterior pelvic tilt, the ability of your core and your glutes to control the tilting of your pelvis. We can quickly test how well you can do this by getting into a 5-iron posture, putting your hands across your shoulders, and seeing if you can tip your waistband up and vice versa. Try going back and forth here without anything else moving and see if you could do this nice and smoothly or if you have to compensate and get out of posture. The pelvic tilt happens in transition in the golf swing. You can see this in Rory McIlroy. He does this very well, whereas he's going and firing his hips towards the target, he's creating a tipping upward of the belt buckle, which will keep those lower back joints nice and open to be able to rotate around. If we stay stuck in a forward tilted position and rotate through that, you're gonna feel a lot more compression in the lower back. And when you're rotating at high speeds, you're at a higher risk for injuring muscles, joints, and discs in the lumbar spine. If this is something that you need to improve on, then I have some progressions that we're gonna go over starting from laying down all the way to standing back up. So let's get on the floor. The floor is the easiest way to work on this first because we have the entire ground giving us stability from our head all the way through our toes. So just start in a hook lying position with your knees bent and feet flat, and I want you to feel your abs here contract to pull the front of your waistband towards your chin. You'll feel a little bit of a rolling in your butt and in your lower back. And in this position with the waistband tilted up, we should feel our core contracting pretty hard. When we let this go, it's going to neutralize. If I go the other way and tip down, you can see my ribs flare out and I can actually stick my hand under this back. So we want the posterior pelvic tilt to open up those joints, which would flatten the back into the floor and again, tip that waistband up and being able to contract the abs. You could start just by doing this for 10 to 15 reps, making sure that you could do this nice and smoothly. And then once you get pretty good at this and it doesn't feel jittery, we can add some resistance just by lifting up the legs. The weight of the legs will now tip us into a forward tilt. You can see my hand coming through here. And then I have to use my abs to pull this waistband back up towards my chin, which will actually pull my legs towards me as well, even though I'm not moving them. So this is the second way to add a little bit of difficulty in this lying position. Our next progression is here on hands and knees. We're a little bit less stable since we now have just 4 points of contact on the floor rather than the entire back. From here, same thing. You're gonna see this cue a lot with some of the exercises in your programming. We want to feel that waistband here tip towards the chin, and you can see the lower back actually rounds and the waistband down here tucks down. Anterior pelvic tilt creates that lumbar arch that we don't want in our golf swing. Posterior tilt opens those joints and creates a strong connection into our core. So start with these 10 to 15 reps after you've progressed from doing it on your back, and then we could progress into half kneeling and tall kneeling. So here we are in the half kneeling position, the third progression of getting towards standing pelvic tilts. You want your knee directly underneath your hip and this shin in front, nice and vertical, with the knee directly in front of the hip as well. Same mechanics. You can even put your hands on your hips and do a little forward, backward tilting motion of your hands to help facilitate this. But again, we want to feel this waistband tip upwards through the contraction of this glute and our core pulling on our pelvis. And by doing this, now you'll start to feel a hip flexor stretch. So this is part of the hip flexor rocker exercise that you'll see in your mobility segments, where we can now just tilt into that pelvic tilt, get a nice stretch in the quad, shift forward a little bit, and back. From half kneeling, now we go into tall kneeling, which is a little bit more difficult because we have tension in both hip flexors that are resisting that pelvic tilt. So the tighter your hip flexors are, the harder that makes this exercise, which is why I do a lot of hip flexor stretching in the programming for you guys. So again, same thing. Now we have both glutes working to help create that upward tipping on the belt buckle in front. And as we let that go, the pelvis tips down again and the lumbar arches. Up and down. If you can get all 4 of these progressions right in supine, hands and knees, half kneeling and tall kneeling, now we're ready to work on this again in standing. Now that we're standing, the best way to work on this first is to put our hands on something to give ourselves some extra points of contact for stability. The wall is the best way to do this. Let's have you in a golf posture now that we're in standing. Put your hands on something that's stable, and let's work on being able to do that same sort of tipping upward and tipping downward of that belt buckle or waistband in the front. What we really want to make sure we're seeing is that the angle in our knees stays the same. We're not trying to influence the waistband here by throwing our hips forward, straightening our knees, or bending our knees more. You can see that how that's going to take me out of posture. In the golf swing, it's all about being able to stay in posture while our body can move in the way that it has to protect our joints. So hands on, tip back and forth, 15 to 20 reps, and then we can move into more difficult versions. So now we have to practice with our hands off of the wall, because in the golf swing, we're not holding onto a wall, we're holding onto a golf club that we're moving. So the next step, and one of the final steps, is to take a resistance band of any strength. We're not going to be putting a lot of tension on this, and just anchor it to something that's not going to get pulled on. You're going to step in with both knees, and just lightly put this on your knees, just below your kneecaps. You don't need to create a whole lot of stretch on this. Now we can get into our address posture. And what the band is doing, it's cueing us to keep our knees still. So whatever tension you feel in the band, you want to maintain that tension as you go through that same forward tilt, backward tilt. We're feeling the core crunch a little bit. Forward tilt, backward tilt. This is the final piece. If you could do this, now we're getting really close to being able to add rotation. So what that would look like is I want to tilt to about neutral and then start rotating, keeping the shoulders still, feeling that we're keeping that waistband tilted slightly up and then it's not dumping down, especially as we move towards our downswing. So tip up, shoulders still, try to maintain that upward tilt of the waistband in the front as you rotate in and out. And then we can start incorporating the upper body movement in the golf swing. If you can do all of those things, your lower back is going to be in a much better position to handle the stresses of the golf swing. If you have